Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Chad and this is Tack House Brewery. Today is brew day and we're going to be brewing up a cream ale in the brewery. It's one of my favorites. Keep cream ales and blondes on tap at all times. It kind of is one of those beers that the non-craft beer drinkers will still drink. They always say, oh, I don't like those strong beers, but what they mean really is they don't like a malty beer or something that's extremely hoppy. Cream ales and blondes, they're both a nice light beer, low hop additions. You know, it's kind of that stepping stone for somebody to get away from a macro beer. We're going to be brewing this on my 3-vessel system. It's a HERMS system. It stands for Heat Exchange Recirculation Mash System. I'll show you how that works when we're in the brewery. And the recipe for this one is pretty simple. We have 78% 2-row malt, and on my system that equates to 21 pounds. And we're going to use 22% flaked corn, and that's 6 pounds of flaked corn. And we're gonna have one hop addition for 60 minutes, and it's gonna be just strictly for a little bit of beering. Without any hops in your beer, it's not beer. It's called Groot. We're gonna use some Safale SO4 for our yeast at the end. I'll be using a lot of terms throughout this whole process, so if I don't explain anything all the way, just write them in the comments and I'll explain them there. With that being said, let's head on to the brewery. We're here in the brewery. I have my water ready in the mash tun, which is this kettle. Down below is the hot liquor tank. The hot liquor tank has my exchange coil in there. So the water's circulating through the mash tun inside that coil and heating up via the exchange that's happening. The hot liquor tank alone, that's going to be used for sparge water, and I'll rinse the grains with that after I'm done doing my mash. Now, with sparging is just essentially rinsing the grains after you completed your mash. Currently in here I have 10 gallons of water. That's going to be my strike volume. I use 1.25 quarts per pound is what I like for a thickness, for my mash thickness. And all I need is about 8 gallons of water, but because I have a false bottom in here, I need to allow for that. So I have 2 gallons of dead space and the rest is going to be used for the mash. We're bringing the water up to temperature. It's going to be 57 degrees. I need that temperature there. It's to get me to 149 for a final resting mash temp. Because the malt is colder than what I'm putting in here, it's going to bring down the temperature. So there's a calculator again on Beerer's Friend that you can use to calculate what your grain bill is and what you need for a strike temperature. So that's what I have it set at. On my system, I know that the calculator is about 5 degrees Fahrenheit too high for me, and so I just allow for that. So it told me to use 162, I'm at 157, and when I mash in, that should be pretty close to that 149. In a 3-vessel system, it's typical to any commercial brewery, they have a similar setup where you have a hot liquor tank, which is this guy down here. It just heats water. That's its only job, and that's all it does. And then we have a mash tun. The mash tun is where we steep the grains and get the sugars extracted from that malt. And then it moves on to the boil kettle here. And this is where all the magic happens. You bring your wort to a boil, and you do your hop additions and any adjuncts and stuff like that at that point in time. And from there, it goes on to the fermenter. And I have a fermenter here. It's a half barrel fermenter from BrewTech. And the whole system is a half barrel system, which equates to about 15 gallons of finished product in the end. All right, we're getting close to temperature to mash in, so I'm just gonna weigh out my malt and we'll start milling it up. Need my 21 pounds of 2-row. We'll get that started. The important thing when you crush your malt is that you're not turning it into flour. You basically want to bust the inside out from the hull so that the hull can create a nice bottom on your mash tun, and it'll have a great bed. It'll act as a filter. If you turn that into flour, you're just going to stick your mash, and nobody wants that. There will be no flow through your pumps, and it just turns into a bad brew day at that point. But all you need to do is just crack them open just enough that you have that inside exposed and bust it up, and that's really what you want to see when you're complete. So the hot liquor tank is almost to the sparge temperature, and the mash tun is getting close to the strike temperature that we're looking for. We've hit strike temperature now. I've overshot by about 1 degree. I think we can work with that. I'm gonna set my new mash temperature at 149 degrees. That's just kind of my go-to number. It ends up with a nice dry finish. We'll be able to start to mash in. We'll take our barley. We'll start stirring it in. One of the major things you want to do is to make sure you don't have any dough balls. So stirring is important. This is like making oatmeal. You see it's starting to get thicker. Everything's looking good so far. It's time to add in the corn. We've stirred all the malt into the mash tun. Get rid of my paddle here. And I'll add my recirculating sparge hose that I use. The pump kicked on. I'm right at the 149 degrees. Calculations worked out well. I hit my numbers. So what's happening now is it's circulating the wort from the mash tun back to itself through the heat exchanger to keep it at the temperature that we want. Right now the procedure that's happening is called Vorloff. And what that's doing is just kind of setting the grain bed so that it's a filter on its own. And we're going to clarify the wort that's going to end up in the boil kettle in the end. We have the grain bed set. We're gonna let that just do its course for an hour. It'll convert all the starches that are in the malt into sugars, and we'll be able to start transferring it into the boil kettle from that point. Our 1 hour timer's up. We can start transferring the mash liquid into the boil kettle, and I'll start rinsing off the mash with the liquid from the hot liquor tank. And so that temperature is a bit higher. We're at about 178, and that'll just stop the conversion from happening, and it's just gonna produce a nice clear liquid transfer into the boil kettle. So right now we've converted all the sugars, and we're just gonna take that and bring it into here. We're gonna get a volume of about 22 gallons. It's up pretty high, and we'll start rinsing that out now. What a sparge is essentially it's just rinsing the grains out from the mash tun. So we're gonna start with that process right now. I fly sparge. There's a batch sparge and a fly sparge. The difference is I take all the hot liquor from the hot liquor tank and put it in the mash tun after I transfer, and I let it set for a while and then transfer the rest into the boil kettle. What I do is a fly sparge, so as it's coming out of here, I'm transferring it at the same rate into the boil kettle. Starting to come out of the hot liquor tank into the mash tun. So now the wort from the mash tun is heading into the kettle. The mash tun is finished transferring into the boil kettle now. There's nothing left in here except for just the grains that are spent, and it's all washed off into here now. What I'm gonna do is take a quick pre-boil gravity just to see where we're at right now. About 9.8 bricks. We'll see what that works out to be. So right now it's saying we'll be about 5.1% alcohol. We're gonna lose a gallon or two during the boil, and that'll make it a little bit more potent. But it's kind of on target of what I was going for. I was hoping for about 5.4 for a finished product, and we'll see where we're at. The kettle is pretty full right here. One of the saving graces I have is Firm Cap S. Just put a little bit of this stuff on the top, and it gets rid of all the foam. A couple of drops is all you need for a 5-gallon batch. This is a half barrel batch, so we need a few more drops. Get that there. As soon as this comes to a decent boil, we're gonna add our first hop addition. I'll get those weighed out right away. Add our first hop addition, and only hop addition, for 60 minutes. So there's a few minutes left in the boil. I'm just gonna add a bit of Irish moss to it so that all that wort can be nice and clear going into the kettle or into the fermenter. I typically do about 2 tablespoons on my half barrel batches, and it's just a habit that I do. Okay, we're gonna transfer it into the fermenter now. The boil is complete. All my valves are open into the fermenter. I'm gonna get that flow going. I'm gonna turn on the pump, and then I'm gonna start adding oxygen into the mix. When you boil, you take out all the oxygen that's in there. So you want to add it back so the yeast has something. I like to add it at about 1 liter per minute into the wort as it goes into the fermenter. We got the worts all transferred into the fermenter now. It's time for me to add the yeast. We're using a Cephale SO4. It's just kind of my go-to. I need 33 grams for a half barrel batch. All right, we'll just throw it in the top here through the 3-inch tri-clamp fitting. And then the last thing that we need to add, this is a tilt hydrometer. It's just a digital hydrometer, not 100% accurate, but it's a good way to just keep track of where you're at with your fermentation. I throw it in every batch, and this battery's lasted me quite a while actually. So we'll get that guy thrown in there as well. Close this guy up. I have a glycol chiller hooked up to my fermenter, so it runs through a coil inside of there, a cold glycol, and it stays chilled. I keep it at around 35 typically right now because it's a higher temperature. I just don't want to waste the electricity. I have it set for 55 degrees. And then my fermenter I'm going to have set at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's where she'll sit until I start doing a cold crash in about 8 days when fermentation is complete. It's come in right around 1.049. It should be about 5.5, a little bit better percent alcohol in the end, and it's just going to be a nice crushable drink this summer. There's another brew day under our belt. We'll have this one from grain and glass in about 12 days. We'll be kegging it in the next video, and we'll have a little bit of a tasting. If you're liking the content that we're making, just don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll keep putting out videos for you guys. Until then, cheers, keep brewing, and we'll see you next time.